Mr. Chair, you are live.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody, to the Building Board of Appeals November 17th, 2021 virtual hearing. I am the chairman, Carl Kors. We have with us today all of our board members, Jay Schwartz, Bob Ruby, Ty Dorman, Matthew Evans, and we have our attorney, Carrie Berger. Before I do let's do the administrative matters, and then I'll do the introductory statements and swearing-ins. We have minutes from August 26th and minutes from October 14th. Have the board members read and reviewed those minutes?
Yes.
Okay. Does anyone have any additions or corrections that they'd like to do to those before they're accepted into before they're accepted?
Good here.
Anyone? Everybody okay with it? I noticed one thing about the October 14th, 2021 hearing. And Kimberly, did you prepare these, or did Maria, or do you both do it, or?
I did, sir.
Okay. There was a list of exhibits, and the first list was, let me get to it. Sorry. Just the first list was noted as T1 through T5.
Mm-hmm.
Now, weren't those the public submitted written testimonies?
Yes, sir.
And weren't there like 30 of them? It's more of a statement than a question. I mean, I want to say there were 29 or 30 of them. And here we're showing just 5.
Well, that would be something for me to look into, wouldn't it? I had 5, but I certainly
Well, let's do this.
We will research that further.
Let's go ahead and deal with the August 26th approval of minutes, and then in our next hearing, or at some point later in this hearing, however we choose to do it, we can well, let's do it for our next hearing. We can have the October 14th minutes augmented and reviewed as necessary.
Right.
Okay. That makes sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes of the August 26, 2021 hearing?
I wasn't there.
Who was there? Bob was there.
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor of approval of the minutes from the August 26, 2021 hearing? Aye.
Aye.
Ty, were you not in that meeting?
I don't recall. Trying to look on a calendar.
This was the back of this was the restaurant seating.
Yes.
The tensile structure roof.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was
So
there.
if you could just vote on approval. All right. Okay. All right. So 1, 2, 3, 4 to
Accused.
0. Jay wasn't involved. Right?
Correct.
Okay. 4 to 0. The minutes of that meeting were approved.
Thank you.
All good? Okay. Let's move on to, is there anything else we need, Kimberly or Carrie, before we move into the first hearing and my reading of the statements and swearing in? Okay. If we could bring in all those folks associated with the Matthew Spear permit SGN 21-0050. And tell me when everyone's in, please.
I believe it's only Matthew Spear here for this, and he is in now.
Okay. Mr. Spear, are you the only person representing your appeal in this case, or should we be waiting for someone else?
No, sir. I am it. Just
Excellent.
alone by myself.
That's okay. All right, so it appears we have everyone for the first of our two hearings. I'd like to read an opening statement, if you don't mind. Changing my glasses, sorry. The Building Board of Appeals is established by City Code Section 0248050. Building Board of Appeals task today is to determine whether or not the City of Annapolis, under Title 17 of the City Code, followed the applicable code requirements and used reasonable care and consideration when approving or denying the permits in question. Additionally, the board will determine whether there is substantial evidence to support the city's approval or disapproval of the permit in question. If the board determines that this appeal is outside or beyond the board's jurisdiction as defined in the city code, the board may dismiss the appeal prior to receiving any testimony or documents relating to the merits of the appeal. Additionally, if the board is convinced that testimony offered by any party is clearly not relevant or material to the issues on appeal, the board may rule either that the testimony not be received or that the testimony be limited. Mr. Manasseh and Mr. Spear, if you could, and Mr. Manasseh, if you could bring your video on, appreciate it.
Mr. Course, this is Kevin Scott. I'm here for the city also.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So anyone that's going to be giving testimony on this, is John not here? He's muted, so we can't tell.
This here, give me 1 second.
There he is. Hi, John.
Hello.
So yes, could you three, Kevin, if you're going to give testimony, Mr. Spear and Mr. Manasseh, raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Very good. Thank you, gentlemen. All right. What I'd like to do at this time is start with a brief summary of Mr. Spear's appeal. And I'd like to, if we can, avoid getting to the weeds or the details in this particular case of elements of signs or things, and just really sort of, try to give like a 2 or 3 minute overview. And then I'm going to turn it over to the city to do the same. Once we've gotten there, that just introduces everybody to the case. Once we've gotten there, then we'll really start to talk about the details and start delving in with questions. Does that make sense, Mr. Spear?
Yes, it does.
All right, please begin.
So good afternoon. My name is Matthew Spear. I believe in brevity, so we'll try to do it. I won't be 6 hours, and I would love to learn a little more about Chomsky and Foucault, what your thoughts are on the debate. Said that since I've watched it myself ad nauseum. It's really simple. I came over here about a month and a half before COVID struck, and I came from Apple and NBC Comcast in Texas, where I ran the entire retail division on the West Coast in Texas. So I came to work for Valor Home, veteran-based company. There were obviously a lot of changes we need to make. The outside exterior of the building had a lot of old signage on it that was out of date. We rebranded the company to Valor Home because we had 4 separate companies under one banner. It was very confusing to our customers. So one of the first things I decided to do was rebrand the company. And in that process in January, we were figuring out how we would have the exterior look. And obviously we decided to contact property management. The previous design had about 86% of the windows covered. This design bumped up to about 88 to 89% after the first few drafts were asked to scale back, especially on the Annapolis roadway, where there would be through traffic would be an obstruction as far as visuals, people would look at it, et cetera, et cetera. And they wanted to have it be very clear. So we removed and we scaled that back. But the side that's in the retail parking lot, those sides are completely covered. We went through several iterations with the property management company under the understanding that this was being approved by the city of Annapolis. We made good faith investments of upwards of $8,000 on the removal and then the replacement of the vinyls. Those iterations passed 3 times to the property management. We were told that any restrictions that were on there were from the city and that we had to correct them, which we did. So maybe a little bit of assumptive on our part not to qualify that this was going through the city, but we were under the understanding that that was happening. So by the time all is said and done, we're about 6 months removed from them being up, and then we received notice that they would have to be completely removed. We would need to send our permit requests back in and then put them back up. And these are unable to be removed at the time without destroying them. So it would be a full loss and then a reapplication in order to do this. So we submitted our appeal and the permit fee in lieu of having the appeal today. It's been moved a couple times, but here we are in front of each other. So that's where we're at now.
Okay, and could you give me for the folks following along, the address of the location in question?
Sure. 1907 West Street, Annapolis, Maryland, 21401. It's right
Thank
across from the Starbucks. And
Very good, thank you.
sure.
Either Mr. Scott or Mr. Manasser, could you give us a brief summary of the decline of the fence, I assume decline of the sign permit, or what the city's role in this has been?
Yes. So when the sign application came in, that was the first time that we saw any of the signs, any of the previous correspondence with the property manager and the business owner we were not involved in. Under 2170-080, it limits the total square footage for a tenant sign in a multi-tenant facility such as this to 1.5 linear feet of tenant frontage up to 40 square feet, and one sign per tenant, an additional sign for a corner tenant with windows in both facades. The window clings all count as signage. So it exceeded the maximum allowable signage, and it was simply denied on that basis.
And has there only been one permit, one iteration of submittal and denial?
As far as I know, yes. We just first saw this application. I don't know the exact date in front of me, but I think it was the summer. I want to say August, sometime July or August, and that was the first time we knew about it, or that I knew about it. And I just reviewed the sign application under the sign code.
And was
It
the
didn't comply.
application submitted by the property management company or by Mr. Spears' company?
By Mr. Spears' company. And then I had follow-up correspondence with, let's see, I wrote a couple notes here. I did talk to Matthew Spear. I talked to Andy Fagnani, and I gave a more detailed explanation as to the code reference as to why it was denied. Initially, I just said doesn't comply with Chapter 2170 to refer to the sign code because it was so far, off from what was allowed. It was clear that it wasn't following the code, and then I gave a detailed description of the points of the code that it didn't comply with, and we never did see a revision to it. The next step was this appeal.
And this is a multi-tenant facility?
Yeah, this is part of that 1901 complex, used to be Johnson Lumber. And it's the retail businesses that are up on the West Street side of the site. There's an apartment building at the back, at the corner of Chinkapin and West Street.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mr. Spear, is there some element of the denial? I mean, I read your letter, and I assume you're in a difficult situation because you acted with good faith with your property manager and went through numerous iterations, as you showed in your email threads. Is there some element of the city's denial that you specifically do not agree with?
Well, I think there's a broad statement. First of all, Mr. Scott, you and I never spoke, so I want to make a correction that this is the first time meeting you in any way, shape, or form. So I'm not sure who you spoke with, but it wasn't me. Second, I know you may have spoken with Andy or possibly Jack Pullins. Does that name sound familiar?
I don't recognize that name, and you're correct. You and I may not have spoke. I do remember speaking to somebody. I guess it was Andy.
Yeah, short conversation.
Well.
Short conversation.
Yeah.
From what he said, it was just basically notification of denial. Hence why we went to appeal. We felt that we had hit a roadblock, and we would have to go through the process. To answer your question, sir, do I feel that the city is culpable in this? And in no way, shape, or form. Do I feel that the city hasn't done exactly what the guidelines are that you've set forth? No, I don't believe that either. I think there is something here where there is a very large gray area during COVID with a lack of in-person communication, with the ability to go ahead and uncover things in person, doing things remotely. has created ambiguity to a situation which is overall ambiguous to begin with. When we inquired on this, there was no communication. The signs were up for 4 years. We were not asked to take down any of the Renovation logos or any of the vinyls. And like I said, those were actually exceeding any of the parameters that have been stated right now. And why we weren't asked to remove those, I simply don't understand. All we've done was replace the vinyls with more vinyls in the exact same stasis, different colors, different logos. And we understand that there might be some that have to come down in order to fall within the guidelines, but to remove all of them is a very large cost to us. And we understand that that's not the city's responsibility. We're just asking for, is there a way to work backwards here via the normal process? Because obviously if we knew, we would have done that. We wouldn't have made a $9,000 investment on a whim. We simply went off the guidance of our property management, and we would expect them to be the experts in this situation. All that red tape, we would expect them to guide us because that's their job. And whether there's a plumbing main that goes out, or whether a window needs to be replaced, or foundation cracks, you would contact the property manager. And along with any expansions or modifications to the premises, you would expect the property manager to do that as well. In this case, we have obvious 10, 12 emails where that was a failed attempt, and we were not notified and therefore remained ignorant of whatever guidelines we had to follow.
Mr. Scott, was the signage previous to Mr. Spears' efforts deemed or not deemed in conformance? And do you only consider that when when a permit is being requested?
Well, first, that wouldn't have been taken into consideration under this permit at the time that it was approved. But regardless of a pre-existing sign, any new sign, if you're putting new signs, it has to immediately conform with the current code. We would allow like face replacements and stuff like that to continue. But if you are altering a sign or replacing it, you have to comply with the current code.
I guess my question is, there's no grandfathering or pre-existing condition or other element to the sign code that would justify replacing in kind a sign that may be not in conformance with the new code?
Correct. Not in this circumstance, because none of the signs, if they, I don't know the facts of what was existing on the building. I don't think they could have been considered to be lawfully existing, because they wouldn't have, there's no record of permits for any previous signs, previous window films. So the fact that they were there would not have made them grandfathered. They just would have been existing unlawful signs that maybe they went unenforced, but that doesn't, negate current enforcement. If they came in for a sign permit, we apply the current code.
Okay.
So,
Sure, but that doesn't apply culpability as
hold
well.
on, Mr. Spear. Yeah, hold on. I don't want you to cross-examine the city.
I'm not. I'm simply responding. Am I not? I'll wait to respond then, sir.
Right.
Go ahead.
So, Mr. Spear, what are you seeking today? I'm having a little trouble putting my hands around it, because normally folks would just say, okay, well, this, in an appeal, the city is not acting in good faith or not making the right decisions with regard to the code. They're not interpreting it properly. It sounds like that might not be the case. I guess in your words, what are you seeking to gain from this appeal?
We're trying to gain acceptance with the vinyls that we have in place that stood there for 4 years prior with no permit in place and no notification that they were in violation. If that processes had changed over that 4 years, well, my point is that the culpability to the business owner, I can understand that things change all the time, but for us to keep abreast of every code that changes, I think it's an unrealistic expectation. If these vinyls were there for 4 years and nobody had said anything, the property management had went through with due diligence to ensure that we were complying with their standards, we would move forward. This was simply a rebranding change. We've invested $9,000 and we were told, if I'm once again paraphrasing, because Mr. Scott and I did not speak, that we have to remove every window cling on the 12 exterior windows. And that's a $9,000 investment. And we are going to have to tear them down, all of them, reapply, then be approved, and then make another $9,000 investment. If that's what we obviously would be less than that because we would have less square footage, it sounds like. But the point being is that is an extremely large investment to make. And the simple question I have is why?
Do any of the board members have questions of either Mr. Spear or the city with regard to this case? Mr. Schwartz?
Question for Mr. Spear. Is your, the photos weren't clear and I went out to the site and I wasn't really sure. Is your storefront a three-sided storefront? There's
Yes,
an
sir.
entrance, there's a streetscape on Pep Boy's side, there's West Street, then there's a driveway in.
Yes, sir.
Is it vinyl on all three sides or two? I know two sides.
Yes, sir. It is transparent vinyl. So Starbucks side, which would be the entryway side. Then you have West Street, which is traffic side, which is about 45% covered. We only have the front entry door, as you can see, and then the windows are wide open. Starbucks side is vinyled from start to finish with a 50% vinyl, which you can actually see through.
True. Yeah. All right.
And the adjacent side is also covered.
So thank you. Now, Mr. Scott, so the sign code applies to only buildings with street frontage, is that correct? So it would not apply to the Starbucks side because that's a driveway? I'm just trying to clarify scope.
It would apply to all buildings, but the tenant frontage is applied to the street facade. The street facing facade is the linear feet that we would take for how wide is that building,
Right.
to apply the multiplier of 1.5
So I'm
square
I
feet
guess
per,
I'm-
but then you're capped at 40 square feet. So even if you could get to like, okay, well, let's take the frontage all the way around the building, you're still going to be capped at 40 square feet. And then we would say this is a corner building, is a corner tenant within the building. So we give them a whole nother sign. So they'd actually get 80 square feet on two different signs.
all right. So
And
so along
Go ahead.
along the Starbucks side, that's not considered a street because it's a driveway. So they'd have two frontages. Is that correct?
correct.
The
Well,
Pep Boys
yeah,
side actually looks like it, although I'm not sure that's a street either. That's just a driveway on the Pep Boys side.
the Pep Boy side, is there windows on that side?
That's
So there's
that's the west side.
the west. Is that the side that is like a parking lot between the commercial building and the apartment building?
That's correct.
Yes.
So that's like the third side. The Pep,
so, I
I
mean,
think of the Pep Boy side is true west. You don't have windows on that side, do you?
We have windows on three sides of our exterior building, which is the West Street side, Starbucks side, and then the residential apartment building. The only one that's completely non-permeable would be the West Street, which we have made only a door and the adjacent windows and removed all the top, which we were told to remove. And I would say 80% of those windows are see-through with nothing on them. Starbucks side is completely covered with 50% see-through, and then residential side is covered with 50% see-through.
So it's if I may, it's a simple question. The actual street frontage that the code refers to is only on West Street. It's not the two sides because those are not streets. That's my question for Mr. Scott.
I don't think the code is referring to just street frontage of saying you only have to have a sign permit if you're facing the street frontage. That the street frontage is the side that we would measure the building width, because you have buildings within sites that have architecture on all sides that face into their parking lots that still are subject to sign regulations.
Oh, okay, because the code says frontage. That was my question. And
It's talking about the building frontage per tenant, so it's not it's not referring to the street. It's talking about the building frontage.
okay, not quite clear, but that's all right.
Mr. Schwartz, what's the code reference number for this issue?
Well, because we're talking about the allowed area,
Right. No, I understand where you're getting at. I just wanted to actually read it myself.
well,
I can give it to you.
2170-080 talks about
Yes.
where signs can be. And in that language, table 2,
Well, hold on, say that again. You said it very fast.
2170-080. And that's a set of tables. And in that tables, it talks about frontage. Nowhere else that I can find does it say where signs may be. It talks about frontage. And then I have a second question for Mr. Scott. Oops, he's gone. Oh, no, there he is.
I'm still here.
So under 2170-060, Kevin, 2170-060, exempt signs. Number 5. It says window displays, signs erected or installed in the interior of a structure which form an integral part of a bona fide window display, which is related to merchandise, services available, blah, 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 which are related to matters of public welfare. Those are exempt. Why are these signs not exempt?
So
I'll go back
if
to that
it-
number if you want. 2170-060,
5.
number 5.
bear with me. I'm looking at this
Yeah.
on my
I'm
other
sorry.
iPhone.
Take your time.
I look at
We're
this.
all- Yep, it's okay.
No, thank God for Mr. Schwartz. That's all I'm going to say.
I'm in
Now,
another
let's not
meeting.
get carried away.
Well, at least in my short experience, I don't know what the 6-hour one looked like the other time you did it.
Oh, Lord.
Jay, which number in 2170-60?
70-060,
5.
number 5. So my question is, why is that not apply?
Integral part of a bona fide window display. Okay, so jump down to terms and definitions in chapter 2172. And then go alphabetically to the S's, where you find the definition of signs. So this wouldn't be part of a window display because of the definition of signs, where it says the term sign includes signs erected or installed in the interior of a structure if the signs are situated in a manner to indicate that its prime purpose for viewing is from the exterior of the structure. The prime purpose of an interior sign is exterior view and is visible from the exterior, and if no public access is permitted between the sign and the exterior window of the structure. So by definition, these clings on the surface of the window can't be part of a bona fide window display.
Okay. So.
And to add to that, in that same definition, it talks about the sign, the description, it directs attention to an object, product, or place, activity, person, organization, business. So these are I think they're referred to in the applicant's appeal as a billboard, just showing their product offerings. So these are clearly advertising devices.
No, that's
So
not
they're-
accurate. No, that's not accurate. I'm sorry. Am I allowed to object on something that's said, or do I have to wait?
Please wait.
Yeah, please.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
I mean, jot it down and we'll give you a chance
Thank you.
here.
Yeah. Once again, I just don't know the rules of the
That's
quorum.
okay.
I apologize.
So the clings are, and Mr. Spear can certainly correct me, but they are illustrations that present what they, like the products and services that they offer in their business. So for that, they're signs. They're not just simply artwork. They're advertising their services. So they're considered signs.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Spear, go ahead.
Thanks. And once again, apologize. I should have asked what the rules are. So
Well,
it's not Perry Mason is what we're saying.
kind of loose, so
Yeah.
sometimes
That's
we
fine.
just go as we can.
So I want to be clear that Valor, whether y'all know our company or not, is that we do obviously sell a product. We're a business. We've given over $225,000 in roofs to veterans. We have partners in 501(c)s and veteran organizations all over the nation. That's not really for the philanthropic side to gain sympathy or empathy. It's simply to say that our mission is more than just putting up roofs. And if you look, American flags, from families to our partnerships of giving back to the Operation Raise the Roof, to Windows for Warriors, Bath for the Brave. These are also on the exterior, along with 2 American flags. So really, if you saw our website or saw the relationship we have with our clients, is that we really, if we're selling anything, it's the mission and how to give back more than just getting a roof replacement. So I understand where we're coming from. I understand that these are advertisements, but they tell a story too. And we were very purposeful in how we do this and how we display this. There is a story that goes along with this. So it matches our site, it matches our print collateral, digital medium, our vehicles, and everything else are all under this brand. So I just want to be careful that this is just a sales message, because I don't think that's accurate.
Okay, very good. Any other board member questions?
Yeah, this is Tyrone. So one of the questions I have for the city is I listened as you read the definition of a sign. And then I guess the question I have is do you guys define what a graphic is? Because if I have an existing sign, i.e. the Pep Boy sign next door, that's it's a post sign and it's sticking up, and they choose to change that graphic out on that sign, that would not require a permit. Is that correct?
Are you referring to their logo as being a graphic?
Correct.
Then
If they change that logo
would
out,
be that would be a sign. So the logo, as much as the lettering, is the sign. So you've got some businesses that all they have is a logo, like they have some symbol that is like their company name might be a symbol. That's their sign. So Starbucks was using an example. They've got that Little Mermaid thing or whatever it is. It may not even say the word Starbucks on it. That's their sign.
Because I guess I'm struggling with every time that a company replaces a logo, changes the color of a logo, do you guys get a permit for that?
Yeah, even a face replacement. If you have an existing sign cabinet and you're just changing out the panel, say you've changed the font or the name of the business, if it's just a face, you get a sign permit, and that's straightforward. You can just replace that. But if you're replacing the entire sign with you're taking the sign off the building and you're putting a new sign that's a different shape or whatever, then that new sign has to conform to the current code, even if the previous sign didn't.
If it's the same exact shape, same square footage, would you need to permit it?
You would still need the permit to do the face replacement. But it would be, in that case, it would be grandfathered in. So say you just had a rectangular, like 3 foot by 4 foot panel box up there, and you're just changing. We'll use this one. Renovation was changing to Valor. They were just changing the panel. No big deal. We would sign off on that permit right away. But
now,
if Renovation was channel letters across the building, and they took that off and put Valor up in its place, then that's a whole new sign, and the new sign has to conform.
So if and so say not this particular, if you had a sign up there that was grandfathered in because it had been there from the 70s, and they were changing that sign out to something smaller, would they be able to change it out to something smaller, or keep the existing square footage of that sign, or would they have to reconform to the more stringent requirement?
They would have to come into conformance, so they could keep what was up there, even if it was grossly too large. It can continue. They can maintain it. They can repair it, paint it, and change panels. But if they replace it with something else, then it has to conform.
But you just said changing panels requires a permit, not conformance.
It requires a permit, but it doesn't require conformance.
Okay.
Because you're not changing the structure of the sign, you're just changing the panel.
So in this instance, would this not fall under the windows haven't been replaced or changed, but they're just being resurfaced?
But these weren't signs that were ever approved in the first place.
So when would a grandfather clause fall in? Because something probably in the 60s was never approved either, but.
Well, in that case, that if it predated the zoning code or the sign regulations that's applicable to it, if it's before that, then it's considered lawfully non-conforming, legal non-conforming. Because the code, the implementation of the code made it become non-conforming. It was lawful prior
So
to
when-
either there was no code required or there was a different code.
And do we have any information on at what date that sign code came in and to what date the current sign was on there prior to this company replacing?
I think this section of the code hasn't had a change since prior to 2005. As far as the issue that we're talking about with the amount of square footage, there was
Right,
some
and I'm just
changes
trying to
about
kind of
lighting and things. This building is a more modern building that was built in the mid 2000s. So it would be pretty unlikely that there was legally non-conforming signs on this building.
I'm not clear on what number we're actually is the threshold. Jay brought up, is it correct that there is only one street frontage because it fronts in two other locations on private access roads? I mean, the back is against there. Is that first of all, are the roads in this development between the commercial and residential side private?
I believe they are private.
And
Yeah.
if they're private, do they qualify as street frontage?
They would still require signage on private roads.
No, but I'm saying the limitations and restrictions to square footage, do they apply on a privately fronted road?
They do, and the limit on square footage goes with the building frontage, not on the street frontage.
Okay, because that seems to be what different than
So
what.
even if West Street was a private road, which is not, it's a state road, but even if it was a private road, they would still require a sign permit from the city, and we would apply the sign regulations to it.
Okay, so your square footage of 40 square feet per side per frontage applies in three sides in this case.
40 square feet per tenant, and then because this tenant within the building is a corner unit that has windows on both of the corner facade, both building facades, they're allowed an additional sign. So they could have up to a 40 square foot on the one face, up to 40 square feet on the other face. But it's 1.5 square feet per building frontage per tenant, up to 40 square feet per tenant.
So if this is the three-sided tenant, Carl, based on Mr. Scott, we can have 40 square feet per side, three sides, two sides, whatever it is.
Well,
I don't
two
think the
sides.
code,
Code doesn't really get into three sides. It talks about the corner with.
Right, but in this
Two.
case, you're on two corners, so we need to address this.
Well, it
What
sounds
is
like
the
it's two corners.
what is the number the city is the threshold? I mean, if you don't know that number, how can you rule whether it's in compliance or not? What's the number?
Well, they would be allowed 40 square feet total on the West Street side and 40 square feet on the other corner facade. And you could go to say that, okay, on that parking lot side, on the other side, they could have 40 square feet there if they have windows and an entrance over there. Or
Okay,
I
so
guess they
it's-
don't need an entrance, but windows. But
It's
have
40
both.
square feet per face in this case. Is that what you're saying?
if they have at least the 1.5 per lineal feet of
frontage.
the front of building frontage, which I think they get there. I mean, how wide is the building on West Street, or the tenant space on West Street?
Yeah.
So if that gets them to 40 square feet, then that would just get them to the maximum amount.
Okay, and where are they now?
I don't know what the exact square footage is. This application didn't specify what the actual number was, but they've got the window cleans are basically their entire face of their entire building. So even without actually doing the hard numbers, it's obvious it's more than 40 square feet.
Is it translucent, or does it have, I mean, I get, I'm kind of looking at a picture here on Google.
Yeah,
So
I've got my raised hand up, so let me
Okay.
know when I can.
Go ahead.
I guess-
Wait till Ty's done. Go ahead, Kyle.
Okay, go ahead, Ty.
The question I have, and it doesn't necessarily need an answer right this second, but is it one solid sheet, or does it have holes in it? Does the city have, do the holes come out of that calculation? I mean, there's a bunch of questions I have with the square footage.
Well, there is a lot of conversation about translucency. Does that even weigh into this? Does the code even contemplate, or is it doesn't matter if it's 90% translucent or 50% or what? Mr. Scott, how does that apply?
It would still count as that's the area of the sign, even if it's translucent.
Okay, so that the fact that you can see through it is neither here nor there in terms of this discussion.
Correct.
Where is that written?
So hold on. I kind of want to finish this question here. So if I'm looking at the current graphic that I'm looking at, and it's got this sort of translucent, I guess I would question if now, are you guys classifying the whole window as a sign, or are you classifying something that has color on it? Because it could be a tinting. I mean, if they change this window out to be, a translucent panels, I mean, there's a lot of ambiguity, I think, in the code on what is going to be evaluated as part of a sign when it gets into graphics. Like, a sign sitting up in the air is very crystal clear. I think graphics applied to a window is subjective.
Well, at code section 21.70.050, in the standards applicable to all signs, under B, it gives you the computation for how you calculate the area.
That again, that code number?
21.70.050 under B, it'll describe that you take the smallest area of a square, circle, rectangular, triangle, combination thereof to, basically we're going around like the extreme limits of the writing or representation or the emblem. So, and it's, so I'm starting to read it here. Together with any material, color, form, and integral part of the background or display to differentiate the sign from the background. So it does tell you how to calculate it, the area.
Okay. Mr. Spear, you have several things you've been waiting on. Appreciate
No, thank you. It's all a learning process. If you look at the photo, which has the overhead shot of the property, we've taken a drone shot. I also have drone footage of this. This is not an eyesore. This isn't, live girls or alcohol within. This is, very tasteful, well done, presentable. It adds value to the street. It doesn't take away. So I think aesthetic purposes are one of the reasons why anyone would want to have these rules in place. And there's many others, but that's one that I look at. So we made that, in all intents and purposes, was an attraction for people to come in.
Can we have that graphic pulled up, that's being referenced?
It's the PDF I sent. It's
just so everybody's looking at the same.
Hold
Yes,
on,
sir.
let me, I'll take a look here. It's in your,
I can share screen if that will allow me to.
yeah, I think we can allow that if
should be able to.
our guys
Yeah.
happen. There you go.
Hold on.
So bear with me. I expanded my window and that didn't work very well. Let me do it this way. So here's the building. You have the parking lot side, which can you see my mouse when I do this, by
Yeah.
the way?
Yes.
Okay, great. You have parking lot side here. This is completely owned by us. This is an empty, no tenant here and hasn't been for quite a while. This is the parking garage here. This is covered by a large tree. There's no place for an exterior sign. I've done retail in 3,700 different locations, and there's just no retail signage that you could put along the fascia of the building here that would be seen. The same thing goes for the storefront, which is Starbucks side. As you can see, there's 2 trees. I mean, it literally is covered with foliage on both sides. It's beautiful, but there is no opportunity to put a fixed wired lit sign here. And then if you look at West Street, it's the same thing. The compromise that we made was you have an entrance coming into West Street, you have an entrance coming into storefront, and you have an entrance coming into parking lot side. We've bracketed both doors and door with the vinyls on all sides. Storefront is completely covered with 50% permeable. You can see through it at night. And when you're walking by, you can see into the store, which was something that we purposely were told that Annapolis had to have. Once again, I don't think that represents anybody here, but that's what the property managers told us. And then parking lot sides covered. But West Street is actually hardly covered at all. If you look here, this is what's on West Street. It's a single door and then an above small square and rectangle. And then there are 2 other windows on this side and this side, which allows you to see through it. There are also windows above all of these section panels here, which are all indicative of these sizes that are going across this entire storefront that are not covered with anything under the awning. They are completely open on parking lot side and storefront side, which I would add to the squared footage considerably.
The grayed out area, is that grayed? What is that material?
Completely see-through and clear. There's nothing there. These are floating, and we purposely did that so they could see into the entrance, which is something we were also told had to be done. And that's on all 3 sides.
Yeah. If you go, and I can share my screen if you all like, but if you go to the Google Street View, I believe it's accurately representing what's going on out there.
And I wish it didn't, sir, because we could go back to the Renovation side, which would help us. I've looked for photos and I wanted to have those here for 4 years. It was gaudy, green, horrible, just some of the worst thing I've seen. It looks like an iVision place, but it was covered as much, if not more, because of the semi-transparent nature, but also that above in the awnings, they were also covered from top to bottom. And we're not saying, listen, we're in violation of the law, so therefore that creates innocence in the future. We understand that. I get it. But you have to understand our situation is that contact was limited during this time. It was difficult to get in touch with anybody. We went through the property management. We were led to believe that this was being negotiated with the city of Annapolis by the property management. And all we're trying to do is say, is there a compromise here? Can we take a few down? Can we make some small changes? What can we do instead of a hard no? Rip it down, go to bare nothing and resubmit? That just doesn't seem like a very amicable or reasonable solution to this temporary problem.
Okay. Could we stop sharing Matthew Spears' screen?
There you
And
go.
could I share mine, please? I can just do it by doing this, I assume.
Yes, sir.
Does everyone see this? Everyone?
Not quite yet, sir. It says it's starting to share.
Oh, okay.
There it is.
There we go.
Okay. So this gives you an idea of, now it looks to me as though, is it correct to assume, can you see my hand?
Yes, sir.
Is it correct to assume that there is no vinyl in this, on this?
That is absolutely correct, sir.
And there's none on this one either.
That is also correct, sir.
And so you were talking about, you showed the sort of gray, dark Valor logo, and this is your entrance door.
Yes,
And,
sir.
So, and then of course, we're talking about all the way, every window in this, this side of the
Minus the awning windows. Yes, sir. The awning windows are twice the size as the below rectangles, the smallest rectangles on the floor.
there are windows under these awnings as well.
Yes, sir.
And they do not have anything.
None of them do along the side, sir.
So 40 square feet is not a lot of square footage, is it, Mr. Scott? Along this, so the tenant has a maximum sign potential along this face of 40 square feet, is that correct?
That's correct.
And a maximum square footage potential along this face of 40 square feet.
Correct.
And in your opinion, Mr. Spear, how many square feet is constituted by your entrance and the attached contiguous windows?
I would say
It's
that's
just-
probably 12 feet high, 10 feet wide at the least. 120 square foot would be my guess. So across
So
the
it's
entire
three
side.
times the maximum signage allowed on this face.
If we're going based upon street side and non-private, yes, I would
Okay.
agree with that, that we would be over. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, just kind of getting a magnitude of what we're talking about. It appears to me that in this face of, let's just take this face for example, if you were limiting 40 square feet to this face, it would probably include about this one little section here.
I would say it would pretty much leave the door and
Yeah.
because that's higher than it would be the door and above it. Both panel sides would have to go, and in the front we would basically have the door and the panel, and then all of those windows. I mean, essentially 90% of this would have to be torn down to 95%.
Essentially, if you kept this door and this door with the thing above it,
Yep.
you would, well, let's just say for argument's sake and hand waving
Yes,
sake, you would essentially be in compliance with the 40 square feet. So we're
About
getting
that.
I just wanted to get an idea of what's there versus what's allowed versus what the city says has to go.
Yes, sir.
So I'll stop sharing now. Unless anybody wants to look at this further or comment on it.
Well, so I have a question, and I sort of did the same thing that you're doing, Carl. However, I went down the street a little bit, and would ask the city, two-part question, does hanging posters on the inside of the window constitute a sign?
It would under the sign definition if it wasn't part of that bona fide window display, if you can't walk between the sign.
So I would assume that because a permit was put in, this has ended up where it's at, because if I go down to the ZIP Center and look at the Armed Forces Recruiting Center, the Beauty Max and all of that, they are well exceeding their frontage, but they probably didn't permit that because they're taping signs up to the windows. Is that a fair statement?
No.
I just review what comes before me.
Yeah.
But see that, oh, sorry, I'll shut up.
So I guess, I guess I'm at a quandary here because, the right answer is permitting it, which seems to cause a lot more issues than obviously the significant amount of tenants on wet streets that probably haven't permitted anything. Which,
Yeah, you're getting into a whole nother.
a whole nother realm, but it's
Does the law,
Well,
cause people to break the law?
is it well, where
the
I
code
guess
is
I'm
what the
going
code
is the interpretation of the code for graphics on Windows thought out well enough to be understood.
Well, look, if I may, the things down like at the carpet store, which is the next block of buildings, they have displays, but they sit back away from the front. And so you can walk between the display and the glass. And that's allowed, I believe, by what Mr. Scott has told us.
oh my
It's not
gosh,
considered a sign because it's not in the window or against the window. In this
they're
case,
all that way.
in this case, this stuff's all applied to the windows. So it is a sign based on the reading of the code. I don't know. I think we can kick this around for a long time, but
Whoa.
we can be sympathetic, but the code says X. We're stuck with the code.
You're stuck with the code for people who actually have the moral turpitude to follow the process. Hold on.
Well,
What I was doing- wait, whoa, 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 I get to
not go
finish.
down.
I can finish, right?
That's
That's not
go
true.
down
You
that.
just told me that people, and I guarantee it, and I'm not gonna narc on fellow businesses, but every single business, and now that it was brought up, I wasn't gonna bring it into this forum. Every single business is doing what we do, but we followed what was asked of us, and we're told that they're not culpable, but we are because we applied for a permit. So if we just would have done this out of ignorance and just kept it where it was and not followed the parameters of what we're being asked, then we would be okay. How does that make sense? And why is there a $500 charge after this was already denied, asked for me before I could have an appeal?
Well,
There's fairness, and then there is just complete ridiculousness, and this isn't fair. I think you all know that.
okay. Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions of Mr. Spear or Mr. Scott? Or would like to see any more exhibits? Mr. Ruby and Mr. Evans have been very quiet during this. I don't mean to call you two out, but are you, is there any questions or comments you have regarding this? And understanding that we'll be deliberating and openly speaking about this in a few minutes, but do you have any questions of the appellant or the city in this regard?
I think I've heard all the angles kind of described, and all the things that were in my mind have been discussed. So I can't think of any further questions.
Okay, Mr. Evans?
Yep, I agree with Bob on that. I don't have any
Okay.
further questions. Thank you.
Mr. Spear, if you would like to make if you have more to say and would like to make a brief sort of closing statement, what we're going to do is we'll close testimony, and then the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us will, and possibly Carrie, will discuss it without interruption from either the city or the appellant as we move toward a decision. Would you like to make any sort of a closing statement on behalf of your appeal?
Nope, I don't think that's necessary, except for the following: is that this was delayed 3 times. I have been more than patient and understanding. My company has been more than patient and understanding. We're not being confrontational. We just want it to make sense. It doesn't make much sense. We did what we thought was right. We went ahead and appealed the decision. We understood that we should put a permit posthumously from not knowing we should have to begin with. We've done everything that's been asked of us. We would simply ask that we understand that it's our job to understand the law. When I was in the police force, when I was in the military, you pull somebody over. It's not my job to tell you it's 65. It's your job to know that. I understand the law. We understand, and we try to work within the confines. But this was a very difficult time. So before we make a decision to charge and have us tear this down for $9,000 and then do it again, I would just say that I would ask you to consider the circumstances. And the frustration that you've heard in my voice is simply because this could have been avoided with better communication to all businesses in the area and not waiting 4 years before we decide to say something about it. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, at this point, unless the city has something to say, we will close the testimony on this appeal. And at this point, like I'll reiterate it, at this point, the board members and our legal representation will talk amongst ourselves. We may say things that enrage you or that you think are wrong or that you want to agree with. We ask that you not, because the testimony is closed, we ask that you not participate in that discussion. But we may ask you specific questions if we don't have them answered during that process. So that
Yes, sir.
understood.
Yes, sir.
We will close the testimony, and I will begin. I'd like to think that sign codes and sign permits and signage in general would be a value judgment, but it isn't. We had a case in the historic district where, I don't know if you all remember, where some paintings were done that could be misconstrued as Soviet propaganda, and everyone wanted it torn down. And if it was an American flag and Budweiser and you know, something else, it may have not been such a big issue. But in that case, the historic Annapolis rules and the sign code governed, although it had a political solution. So although I personally don't find any of the signage offensive, I think it's very tasteful. I've walked by there, and this was the first time that I've looked at it, you know, sort of in a very particular way. But I can tell you that when I've gone by it, it's not done anything shocking to my system, nor has it caused me any safety issues or other things that would hinder my well-being. But that being said, again, it's not a value judgment. It's a code question, and that's what this group is here to address, is whether or not it adheres to the code. I understand and am sympathetic, as I think everybody is in this group, to the difficulties that have occurred over really the last year in getting people to properly communicate and to follow up and do their things that we expect them to do. It's been troubling for me in my business end as well. So I'm empathetic toward that issue. So that's all I'm going to say for now. Mr. Schwartz, do you have anything to add?
No, I think you've said it nicely. I think I think that the definition of frontage needs work, but other than that, I think you've said it well.
Yeah. So is there a motion with regard to the conclusion of this appeal?
Before you get into that, I just want to make sure, because I may have missed this. Did you accept any of the records into evidence?
Oh, I'm sorry.
like the
No.
application?
Could we do that? Could we accept into the record of all of Mr. Spears? I have it as just one file, but I believe it is. Hold on a second. We have his Mr. Spears' application to the board, and which is a single page, and 15 pages of emails and exhibits. And I would move that we accept the 16-page submittal by Mr. Spear into evidence and call it whatever we want to call it, Kimberly. Exhibit 1, or do you want to? I don't know if we need to name everything. If it's just one collection of exhibits.
Well, there's also, and I don't know if the members of the board have had the opportunity to review it, but there's also the application that went through and then the denial. Those were sent in the email.
Right, well, I haven't gotten to that
Kimberly.
yet. I'm just starting
Okay.
with this one.
I thought you were just limiting it to that, so my apologies.
No. So if we can move to accept Mr. Spears' 16-page, which includes the application exhibits, as Exhibit 1. And then also I received 2 different denial documents, both of which are only 1 page each. The first denial document is, I'm looking for a date, but it looks just like a screenshot. Its date is 8/19/2021, 8/18/2021. Applied, denied 8/19/2021 with please review chapter 21.7 of the city code for sign regulations. And that is the first denial sheet. That could be exhibit 2. Second denial sheet is 9/2/2021. And it says, please provide the letter that value is the same company as Renovation can be emailed to Done. So I think that's just more correspondence, not necessarily a denial. Is there more? Are there more things, Carrie, that I need to consider?
I'm just making sure, because I think the actual permit application that was filed is not part of the request document. So you may just want to clarify that you're also accepting that into the record. There's some of the photographs are the same, but the actual application that went before planning and zoning is not.
Okay, there is a 4-page document entitled Application and Plans that we would accept into the record as Exhibit 4. That has a note, handwritten note on it that says denied based on K. Scott's note. And it may include some redundancy in Mr. Spears' exhibits, but that's okay. So are we clear on that, Kimberly?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. That being said, Any motion from any member of the board with regard to
I
the
guess,
decision?
so I sort of have some questions.
Oh, sure.
And maybe Jay can kind of help me out because he seems to be more the resident expert on trying to, on signs than I am. So when I go through and I read the sign definitions, Jay, it's very crystal clear in, wall signs or post signs, wall mounted signs. And when I go into the exceptions is the only place where I see window displays. And I guess I'm struggling to figure out whether this sign actually falls under any of those definitions of signs, or if it falls under window displays. And you kind of understand this a little bit better than I do. So, I just kind of want to make sure that I'm reading correctly, because when I go into the types of signs permitted, it's very crystal clear that those types of signs permitted fall under wall mounted, sidewalk, multi-tenant facility, but it doesn't address window.
So if I may, I think window, in this case, window and wall are almost they're repetitive. They basically mean the same thing. If it's on a window or if it's inside a window, but based on the exempt, and this is based on some of what Mr. Scott said, is that if you have a window, it is a wall. I mean, structurally, it's the wall, right? It's the face of the building is either a window or a wall. And you're allowed X amount of sign. The exemptions come in when it's a display with distance between the window wall and the sign itself. That's where the exemption comes in. So if they pull it back 3 feet, or my understanding, if they pull it back 3 feet, which is most of the carpet people, the carpet, they have big displays, but they're 3 feet, 4 feet back from the outside face of the wall or the window. So my read is the window wall definition, it's basically the same thing. It's
So
just
two questions. Yeah, two questions to that is, one, the exemption doesn't say it has to be pulled back 3 feet. And then the other question is if I go elsewhere in our building code, I guarantee you they're going to define a wall and a window very crystal clear of what is a wall and what is a window. And they're not going to merge them as the same, right? Because they're clearly not the same in the remainder of the building code.
I mean, I think this definition says, look, you can have 40 feet, or whatever. It's a frontage, it's 1.5, it's 1 square foot per foot and a half of frontage, or whatever the number is. You can have that much sign. And so it's a general description. I'm not comfortable with sort of the definition of the frontage, what's frontage or not. But, so our code is fraught with these general definitions, and it's up to, I believe, we have to read it and figure it out and make a distinction and make a call. And so I don't think there's, in the side code, there's not any distinction between the surface of a window or the surface of the wall. It's one.
Right. And that's sort of, obviously you've heard, I have a concern on a graphic versus a sign, right?
Right.
A graphic and a sign are two completely different things.
Well, yeah, we can talk language.
Because you could essentially paint the siding of your house as a sign, and is it a graphic or a sign, right? So there's ambiguity in there that I think the city needs to clarify.
Well, that's been defined actually within historic district code, that I think the definition within the city code says if it transmit a message, it's a sign, a message, So within the historic district on West Street above Gavin's restaurant, whatever, Metropolitan or whatever it is,
Tsunami.
they painted, Tsunami. They painted inside the building, and that became that created landmark decisions and that were applied to city code. But basically, so the sign code here doesn't really address some of your questions or my questions. But I don't think in this case, well, we can make our own distinctions on how we feel and what the code says.
Okay. Any more questions, Todd?
No, it's clear as mud.
I have
Okay.
I have a question, Carl, and for the board. Can the motion, there was some back and forth with Mr. Scott about how much the frontage is and how many sides they could have 40 feet on. Can the board's motion clarify that this building has 3 frontages, therefore it will be allowed to have 40 square feet of signage on 3 frontages?
I mean, it could, the parking lot frontage appears to be the smallest frontage. If it's even called, I mean, to me, that's not a frontage, but whatever. I mean, the engineer in me says, I don't want to state any number without having, proper measurements and stuff.
Right.
You can all look at the West Street frontage and say, oh, well, that's obviously, going to qualify for the maximum. We could look at the public access and say, but, when you apply a number to it, you really should have gone out and measured it.
Right. Good point.
I would also like to, and again, it's clarification because it's gonna, particularly for the applicant understanding that full amount of percentage, because if you look at the graphic that has been applied when you brought up the street front image, there's a building number on there on the door, right? That's in this case, it's being applied as part of the sign area, because it's part of that whole graphic, but that's clearly a building number, which is not, I would assume, would not be classified as a sign.
Well, I mean, if it came down to an argument between 40 and 41 square feet, I mean, you could say that the number is not appropriate and it shouldn't be 41, it should be 40.
Right.
But I mean, that we're not.
Right,
we're
and
arguing.
it's kind of hard to, are we talking 40 to hundreds of square feet? I mean, we really don't have that full.
No, 40 is the maximum.
Right, but we don't have that full number in front of us. I mean, we know.
No, there's an assumption on the part of the city that at least the 2 frontages at West Street and the private drive allow for the maximum of 40 square feet. There's an assumption baked into this whole, to the city's review. Is that correct, Mr. Scott? Mr. Scott may have stepped ahead.
No, I'm there. Yes. Yeah, you're correct.
Okay. I mean, a lot has been, Mr. Spear brought up the financial toll, and I believe that Valor has been damaged. I don't believe they've been damaged by the city. I believe they've been damaged by their property manager, and that if they have any sort of recourse for recuperation, it's between them and the property manager. So that being said, does anyone have any motion, or are you gonna wait for me to put something together? Thanks, Jay.
If you can't handle it, let us know.
And we'll replace you, right?
No.
I don't think I need to get too specific or detailed about that. I would move to deny the appeal based that the city has properly interpreted the code to allow for a maximum amount of signage on this property that has been exceeded in this permit application. Do you wish to make that more elegant, anyone? Go ahead.
I would simplify it. I would simplify it and deny the appeal based on the relevant code sections. Number 2, ask the city and the applicant to work together to figure it out. I mean,
Well, I think we do that in everything, and I'd like to urge Mr. Manasseh and Mr. Scott to be empathetic toward the situation, to apply any value judgments that they're allowed to apply, and to create the best possible outcome. But why don't you repeat that motion one more time, Mr. Schwartz?
I'd move that we deny the appeal based on the that the city has acted properly based on the current code.
Okay. And is there a second?
I'll second that.
And all in favor of the motion? Mr. Dorman, you're okay. So it's going to be 4-1.
That is correct.
Okay. So let the record show that Mr. Evans, Mr. Corse, Mr. Ruby, and Mr. Schwartz voted to deny the appeal. Mr. Dorman was the one dissenting view. I think that concludes this hearing on 1907 West Street. At this time, we will not adjourn, but we will close this hearing and move to the second. If we could get the Julian to manipulate those who are panelists at this time into the second hearing, we will move on to the next one.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay. We have a new cast of characters on our screens, which includes Mr. Hyatt, Ms. Jones. I think that's the only new participants. Does that constitute the entire people that plan to participate in this hearing, which is MJRJ Properties LLC versus the City of Annapolis, permit number BLD 21-0598?
Yes, it does.
Okay. If I could quickly swear you in. Ms. Jones, if you're going to give testimony, Mr. Hyatt, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Very good.
Yes.
Carrie, should I read the opening statement again, or?
I don't think you need to. You're good
Okay.
to go.
We heard.
That's a mouthful. All right. So what we like to do in this case, Mr. Hyatt's well aware, but Ms. Jones, maybe not so much, is we would like to have the appellant give a 3-minute, 2 or 3 minute summary of the issues that have come to this appeal, not delving into details or exhibits or anything, but just an overall summary. We then will pivot to the city to give the same very short summary. And then at that point, the board members and you all will get into the merits of the case. So Mr. Hyatt, will you be speaking on behalf? Okay. So if you could just give us a brief summary and tell us how we got to this point today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Alan Hyatt, 200 Westgate Circle. I suspect this case will not take as long as the last one that I presented in front of you.
Gosh, we hope so.
Right. I represent MJRJ Properties LLC, which is the owner of 1025 Hanson Street. And this is really a simple question that I think is before you. And it's about the building permit 210598. And that building permit was conditioned upon supplying a sprinkler system for this particular single family home. The owner of this LLC is Melissa or Missy Jones. She's the sole member. And, the purpose of the appeal is to allow us to go forward with the improvements to a basement without the necessity of having to install a sprinkler system. And what happened here is that there was work done in the past, and it was necessary to apply for a permit. And what you will see is that the gross floor area of the work to be done is less than 50%. And when you take the definition of the code or contained in the code, I think, as one of you said before, you're stuck with the code. That's what the code says. If we have less than 50% of the gross floor area of this structure that is subject to the work, then there's no requirement for sprinkling. And we believe that is correct. That it's only the basement that is being proposed for work. And that is about 34% of the total floor area, because we don't have to get into other areas of the house. We stay confined within the basement. Now, maybe to add to some confusion, there was a prior permit that was issued. It expired in May, I believe it was, or June. And that was not acted upon because I had the same condition in it, that there was a need for a sprinkler system, but work wasn't done under that permit. So it lapsed, and now we've applied for a new permit, granted, subject to sprinklering, and we just don't believe sprinklering is required. Not that sprinklering is not a good thing, for safety and what have you, but the code is the code. We're talking about a modest single-family home, only trying to repair or do alterations to the basement. And we think the code is clear that it does not require sprinkling. That's our statement. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Manasseh, I'm assuming you're going to be speaking on behalf of the city?
That's correct.
Okay, please start.
For the record, John Manasseh, Chief of Code Enforcement, Department of Planning and Zoning. I think the statement by Mr. Hyatt certainly has some validity in that there are elements of this particular project that are a little bit unclear to us in regards to the scope of the different work that's been done. There are some things that we will stipulate regarding the amount of work that was applied for versus what was done. I think the issue that we have is that there was a demolition permit issued in 2018, August of 2018, for a shed and a deck. On an inspection subsequent to that, we noticed different construction debris on the site. And so we issued a stop work order because there was interior demolition going on of the structure, the house itself, not the deck and the shed. The deck apparently was left in place and the shed was removed. Subsequent to the stop work order, that was the earlier building permit, a 2019 building permit that was issued in June. That was for first floor kitchen, bathroom remodeling, and some various window replacements and door replacements. In that permit, a sprinkler system was required based on the scope of the work. The permit was issued. Subsequent to that, a tank permit was obtained to remove an above ground oil tank. There was also a mechanical permit obtained for installation of 2 heat pumps, as well as an electrical permit that goes along with the heat pump installation. So those 2 permits, actually 3 permits, the tank permit, the mechanical permit, and the electrical permit were all finalized by August 2019. The building permit, though, never got any building inspections, and it expired in June of 21. The more recent permit was issued in October of 21, and it again required a sprinkler system. I think this is where I will stipulate. We don't know what was done or what was not done related to the other permit. We never got in to do any inspections, but knowing that a sprinkler system was required for that, I think we notated on this one that a sprinkler system was also required. looking at the applications, the original building permit application, the amount of area listed under construction was greater than 50%. I'll stipulate that on the subsequent building permit for the basement, it's less than 50%. So I'm willing to go forward and say that if none of the other work was done, meaning there was no work done related to kitchen and baths on the 2019 permit, and there was no work done in the bedrooms or anywhere else, I would stipulate that the requirement for a sprinkler system for a basement only would not be supported by the code. But we have to have some method of verifying that that work was not done. So that's where we stand with it. And I apologize for not attempting to resolve this issue before coming to an appeal, because I think these are things that could have been resolved before coming to an appeal. But, you know, a lot of water is moving under the bridge, so to speak. And this one got away from us. And by the time it was on our schedule, it was kind of too late to unwind it. But that's where we are with the project.
Thank you, Mr. Manasseh. Mr. Hyatt, is the current appeal for work that is it a permit after the fact? Has the basement work already been done or has not started?
I think most of the basement work has already been done. Ms. Jones can confirm that.
And was that done under the previous permit or no permit, or how did that commence?
I think, and Ms. Jones, I'd like you to answer the question. I think that was done before any permit was issued. Is that a fair statement?
It was done, the basement work was done under the previous permit.
It was, okay.
And that previous permit included first floor work as well.
But can I just?
I mean, the request, it requested more.
But the first floor work that was done, and Ms. Jones, I want you to answer this because it would answer both my question and Mr. Corse's question. My understanding is that any work that was done was only cosmetic, like painting, and you put in new carpeting and that sort of thing. You didn't do any work that required a permit on the first floor. Is that correct?
Correct. We did, there was some broken windows that had to be replaced, and we did the lead paint abatement that was required by law to have a tenant in there.
So it seems to me, Mr. Chairman, that if we could get together with Mr. Manasseh and confirm that there was no work outside of the basement that was done that was under a permit, and we're confined to the basement, other than the cosmetic work that I mentioned, then sounds like we can resolve this. Is that a fair statement?
Do any of the board members have any questions? Oh, go ahead, Mr. Manasseh.
I'd like to just ask, in the original permit, the scope included kitchen and bath remodels, and it included new cabinetry. Was that work done?
Ms. Jones, that question's for you.
Yes, the kitchen cabinets were replaced. There was in the bathroom, there was new fixtures put in. But it sounds more extensive than what was done. It was cosmetic, as Mr. Hyatt was mentioning.
Okay, I just want to point out that although replacing kitchen cabinets, if you're not moving any walls, a building permit's not required to replace kitchen cabinets or bathroom vanities. However, when you move or replace fixtures, you are required to get plumbing and electrical permits. So the fact that the appliances may have been replaced, even if they're replaced like kind, they still do require plumbing and electrical permits. And the work in the basement, if the sheetrock has been installed and covered up electrical wiring or plumbing, that very likely will have to be taken down so that the work can be inspected, because no permits were ever applied for any plumbing and electrical work. And the 2021 permit for the basement renovation says it was an unfinished space being finished as a living space. So that to me means it was a complete electrical and potentially plumbing installation. There may have been rough-ins there, but you still have to put in plumbing to complete that. So you would have needed plumbing and electrical permits to do that work. So I just want you to be aware that there may be some deconstruction just so that we can do inspections on the materials that you put in.
Well, the basement, there was a rough-in for the bathroom in the basement. It was 2 bedrooms, and the bathroom was already existing. So what do you need plumbing for the basement?
Before we get into that, Mr. Hyatt, you had made a suggestion that I think is very elegant. Would your client be interested in meeting with the city at the premises, reviewing the work that was done in the basement and on the first floor, possibly revising the application and moving forward, assuming that those will result in less than the 50% requirement that we're talking about today?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Maybe what we do today is continue the case, table it, so to speak, and have that process go forward where we have a site visit and an inspection, and it may turn out that we're in agreement and the permit could be modified so there's an elimination of the sprinkler requirement. If that's the case, we'll withdraw the appeal and we're done. If we have a disagreement, then we either go forward with the appeal or we say, okay, we know we're going to have to put in a sprinkler system.
Well, and I think what Mr. Manasseh has brought up is really, really important for the applicant to understand, is that there may have been some work done that will require deconstruction to satisfy possibly revising your building permit to include electrical and mechanical work that was not contemplated when the application was presented. So I think that's a really important thing to understand, because these things can cause shock sometimes if that's not understood.
No, I understand. Hopefully it won't be a full deconstruction. I've seen drywall carved out where you look behind it and you try to minimize any impact. But I think that's the best approach for us.
Would any board members object to that strategy? And let me just articulate it so that I make sure I understand how we're doing it. We would continue this, and between now and the next time we meet, we would urge the applicant and the city to work together. And then prior to that point, or at that point where we meet again, the city or the applicant or both would present their conclusions, and then there would be a decision to move forward with the appeal. And the appeal is just on the sprinkler code, or to drop it, right? Am I getting that right?
I think that's fine. That we would agree to that, and I can contact Mr. Manasseh, try to get this coordinated, and see if we can't resolve it.
Mr. Manasseh, do you think it's appropriate that a comprehensive inspection that kind that is necessary for you to make those determinations could happen within 30 days?
Yeah, absolutely. We can essentially meet at the applicant's convenience, and it shouldn't take very long just to review what's in the structure and go from there and come up with a solution.
Okay. So if anybody doesn't chime in the next 10 seconds on the board, I will move that we continue this case until our next regularly scheduled, I mean, we regularly schedule our hearings for the last, it used to be the last Tuesday of every month. Somehow there's been drift, and now we're on Wednesdays. I mean, Carrie, should I put a 30-day continuation, or what would you recommend in terms of time period?
I mean, it sounds like it's achievable within 30 days. So unless either, the city or the applicant have an issue with 30 days, I think it's a reasonable time period to set.
Okay, so let's move for a 30-day continuance to allow the city and applicant to work through the issues, and we will readdress it in 30 days or less to determine if the current appeal for the sprinklers will go forward or not. Kimberly, does that make some sense to you? You got that?
I do. I have it, sir.
Thanks. All right. Do I have a second for that motion? Second. All in favor? Okay, it's unanimous. So the case is continued, and if this happens in the next 10 or 12 days, please don't wait for 30 days. Contact us via email, and hopefully we can resolve this to everyone's satisfaction.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Ms. Jones, I just wanted to make a mention. The appropriate thing to do at this point is just to call or have your contractor call whoever your representative is, if it's not you yourself, just a progress inspection on the 2021 permit, and schedule that whenever it's convenient to you, and the building inspector will be there that day to look at it with you.
Okay.
All righty.
And we'll
Thank you.
assume, Mr. Manassa, that you will have a discussion with the inspector so that they understand the scope of what we're trying to achieve here today.
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. All right, so we're going to close the testimony on that and allow that continuance to happen. So at this point, I think we can adjourn this hearing. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Motion to adjourn from Jay, second. From Ty, all in favor? Aye. All right, thank you everyone, and we'll see you either next month, or we'll correspond between now and then.
Thanks so much.
Have a great day.